Hello, my name is Omar Abased. It is 5:44 p.m., August 11th, 2020. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the evolving technology and the way um, COVID-19 is is shaping the way people have intimate relationships, have sex, for instance. Um, it would seem to me that with social distancing and people talking about um, COVID-19 being around forever, even though there's going to be vaccines, there are no guarantees that the vaccines are going to work and give us protection for any length of time. So we're going to continuously need vaccines. If the world goes for this, then this is what's going to happen. If people, if people, and I'm getting stung as I'm talking. If people go for it and don't push back, then this is what's going to happen. We are going to be told what to do in our bedrooms. We're already being told what to do in our bedrooms. Don't have sex. Don't kiss without a mask. Without a mask. Like, could you imagine kissing with masks on? And all of this because there is a virus out there that, come to think about it, is not much different than, any other virus that could kill you without you knowing. Viruses are not ever completely wiped out from the face of the earth. Things like polio, things like the plague, these things are not wiped out. Viruses are around us all the time. I'm not saying that these viruses are around any particular area. I'm saying generally, I'm speaking generally. There are deadly viruses around us all the time, right? So COVID-19 is just one of the many. And before COVID-19, people lived their lives normally. We did not wear masks. We weren't getting killed for not wearing masks. People are getting so paranoid about it. They're killing people for not wearing masks. Getting arrested for not wearing masks. Social distancing, not getting charged for not social distancing. Kids can't have friends. They can't play. They can't have physical contact sports. So life as we know it has changed. I mean, my having to put on a mask to go out, to me, is something that really bothers me. I could see social distancing. I mean, we stand apart about 3 feet anyways. 6 feet is quite a bit of distance. But if you're social distancing, there should not be any need to wear masks. So, to me, it's redundant. But that's my personal opinion. People who think that they're vulnerable and they could get infected and they could die, then they should wear it. In my opinion, it should not be mandatory to wear it, and social distance at the same time. Maybe you should carry one around with you, and if you if there are incidents in which you'd have to be very close to somebody, then you wear it as a compromise. But my point is that there are all kinds of viruses out there that we don't know about. There are viruses that that's not being discovered yet, that could kill us faster than COVID-19. You go camping and you get stung with something. You get stung with a mosquito, you get stung with an insect, you have a reaction, you drop dead. I mean, there are things that will kill you instantly, just instantly. So COVID-19 to me is and I'm trying to find the right word. A lot of people use scamdemic. I think it's more than that. I think that my throat is being hit. Yeah, that's on and off. Yeah, it's on and off. Yeah, scamdemic. It's more than just a scam. I was reading an article that Fauci is going to be making, billions of dollars in the vaccines. Well, that's a scam. But it's more than that. It's furthering an agenda of the New World Order making. And it's about control. It's about absolute takeover of human beings and absolute control. So I have been tweeting about, speaking of control, about a lot of incidents that occurred in the building here about being remotely accessed and sexually violated. And I've been doing that for a very, very long time, years, been tweeting about it. And there's a lot of talk outside the window that points to my being accessed and my being sold virtually, remotely. Because the people who access me stand outside the window and talk about it. So with COVID-19, the agenda behind COVID-19, I should say, is pushing virtual sex, because we're not supposed to be touching people anymore. We're not supposed to be having sex. Actually, I read an article that pushed not having sex. And since COVID-19 is going to be around forever, that means that you're not going to have sex forever, physical sex. But they're pushing online sex, they're pushing virtual sex, they're pushing haptic technology. So let me read an article about virtual sex and where, as far as crimes go. So this article is actually in the WashingtonPost.com website. And it's the title is Crime on the Virtual Street. Crime on the Virtual Street. Haptics, algics, and assault. Now this falls in line with my tweets. And the cops are constantly telling me that I'm mentally ill. And I'm constantly tweeting about what I'm experiencing, because I know I'm not mentally ill. And what I'm tweeting about is real. So this article is by Eugene Volokh, dated March 24th, 2017, 3 years ago. So I'm just gonna read some of it here. So I'm blogging excerpts this week and next week from Mark Lemley's and my new article, Law of Virtual Reality and Augmented Reality. This post is from the criminal law part. One general assumptions, and I may be skipping comments and sentences along the way. One general assumptions we made throughout the virtual reality and augmented reality technology, think something like Google Glass, will get better, cheaper, and more effective. One general assumption, I'm going to start again. One general assumption, and I'm being hit. My eyes are being hit. My nose there's a tickling sensation in my nose. If you look at my video, I'm always playing with my nose. That's because there's a tickling sensation around the nose all the time. And my mouth gets dried out all the time. The face is constantly hit when I do these videos. One general assumption we make throughout the virtual reality and augmented reality technology, think something like Google Glass, will get better, cheaper, and more effective at rendering lifelike human avatars that track the user's facial expression. I think that's a safe assumption given the general trends of computer technology, and one that doesn't require any major technological breakthroughs, but we are indeed prognosticating about technology that's likely at least a couple of years out. Well, this was in 2017, so it's here. So far, we talked about harms that can be caused by the audio-visual features of VR. The only features that are well developed now, but let's turn to features that VR is likely to acquire soon. Haptics. Haptics are to touch what our optics are to sight. Haptics, again, haptics are to touch what our optics are to sight. Existing two-dimensional games have very simple haptics. A PlayStation DualShock controller that vibrates when you drive over bumps or run into something, for instance. But the immersive nature of VR can offer quite a bit more. Gloves that reproduce sensations on fingers are haptics. So are temperature controls that can make VR tourism more realistic. So are devices that can cause feelings of physical resistance so that a virtual sword fight would yield realistic sensations when your virtual sword hit your virtual opponents. And one can also embed haptics and remote control into sex aids. A business called Teledildonics. Teledildonics. Teledildonics raises the possibility of haptic sex crimes. Unconsented to sexual touching is a serious offense and should be, sorry, let me do that again. Unconsented to sexual touching is a serious offense and should be so and be so even and should be so even if the person so let me start it again. Unconsented to sexual touching is a serious offense and should be so even if the person doing the touching is not in the room with you. And it's amazing. Right now, it feels like there is something touching my nose as I'm reading. So it's very distracting. True, sexually transmitted diseases and unwanted pregnancy aren't threats in the virtual world. And some people may be less troubled by unwanted remote fondling through their haptic interfaces than by unwanted in-person fondling. But we think it likely that people will be justifiably upset enough by such unwanted touching that it would merit punishment. What have I been tweeting about for years in this building? When the worker outside the window says, it's a gerbil, what does he mean? When he says, I'm gonna fuck with it. Sorry about that. I try not to swear on these videos. I'm sorry. But that's exactly, he says it so often, that's exactly what he says. So it came out, slipped out that way, because that's exactly what he says. And he says it with such violent tendency that it's inside of me. And I hear it so often outside my window that it's inside of my head. So it came out. So I apologize for that. So true. So let me just read that whole paragraph. Teledildonics raises the possibility of haptic sex crimes. Unconsented to sexual touching is a serious offense and should be so even if the person doing the touching is not in the room with you. True, sexually transmitted diseases and unwanted pregnancy aren't threats in the virtual world. And some people may be less troubled by unwanted remote fondling through their haptic interfaces than by unwanted in-person fondling. But we think it likely that people will be justifiably upset enough by such unwanted touching that it will merit punishment. Okay, so there are comments that I hear outside the window. I have her rented out by the hour. PK wants to play with his electric rod on genital parts. I'm being shouted at outside when I go out walking. She's a prostitute, she's an effing whore, when I have absolutely no physical contact with these people, which means that they're getting this information from people who are accessing me remotely and acting on my body remotely as I sleep as well. Because there is no physical contact with men, or women for that matter, because I hear it from women as well. There's absolutely no physical contact or exchange of money or payment in any way whatsoever. Well, first of all, there's no contact, so there's not going to be any exchange of any form. But for the lies, I should say, that's being presented, for the men who are accessing me remotely and are lying and saying, well, she crossed my path and we did make contact. I'd love for them to come bring the proof, by the way, of that. There is absolutely no payment of any kind that they can bring as proof, because it's never happened. There is no proof of interacting in a way that could be seen, perceived as prostitution. I dated, period. And that's being twisted. to make it look like something was going on that wasn't supposed to. And of course, it was just dating, because this is what pimps do, criminals do. Today, the worker outside is talking. I heard he opened a new account. There's a new flag, and we don't play around turning up the power. You know, we're going to beat you up, and this is all with directed energy weapons, because everything is being done virtually and remotely. So just like haptic technology and teledildonics is a way of accessing your body and stimulating it in a sexual way, because it is about sexual pleasure. It's exactly the same way directed energy weapons are affecting your body. The two go together in trafficking. This is how trafficking is done. This is how remote trafficking is done. The directed energy weapons are used to remotely torture you and force you into doing it. So this building will have to be investigated for this crime. Similar issues, let me continue reading. So similar issues come up outside of sex. Say some people enjoy a particular game that's supposed to simulate a dangerous physical activity, fighting, mountain climbing, flying an airplane, but are frustrated that death or injury in the game has no real consequences. They think it makes themselves and other players reckless and distorts the game's realism. Playing poker for matchsticks, it is often said, isn't the same as real poker. Likewise, playing at sword fighting when being speared through the neck just means game over isn't as realistic, they think, as it should. So they think players ought to have skin in the game, as it were. Certain events should trigger something bad, not death. They are not that hardcore, but physical pain. Indeed, paintball players sometimes take the view that the painful sting of being hit enhances the game by making players work harder to avoid being hit, or just by making the game exciting. Likewise, some social psychology experiments punish people who lose a game by requiring them to consume a substance that is extremely unpleasantly bitter to encourage participants to take the game seriously. So imagine then that a VR setup can have an optional hardware feature, a device that produces an electric shock that is not dangerous but is painful. One might think of it as algic haptics. People who want to play extreme sword games, let's call it, must have the device attached, and when they are hit with the virtual sword, they get a real shock. Here, unlike with our previous examples, we do have actual physical contact with the victim's body, albeit contact triggered at a distance rather than by someone standing next to you. So long as the shock doesn't pose any serious physical danger, causing the shock by hitting someone in game wouldn't be battery. Battery generally requires non-consensual touching, at least so long as it doesn't involve a public fight that risks spreading or serious physical damage that goes beyond mere pain. This is why a wide variety of often painful activity from football games, and I'm being hit right here, and I get hit here when I'm sleeping to wake me up at a very high power. And it's being done right now to distract me. And if I were to take the temperature of that spot, I'm gonna return to the article in a second. See there? So if I were to take the temperature of that spot, 36.4, 36.4, 36.4, 36.4, 36.3. Okay. 36.3, 36.3, 36.3. So this is what I mean by being remotely accessed. So let's go back to the article. So let me start with battery. So battery generally requires non-consensual touching, at least as long as it doesn't involve a public fight that risks spreading or several or serious physical damage that goes beyond mere pain. This is why a wide variety of often painful activities, from football games to mild sadomasochism, are legal. And you consented to be hit by a virtual sword, or at least to run the risk of being hit. By contrast, triggering the haptics outside the game, for instance, by hacking someone's VR rig to give them a surprise electric shock, presumably would be non-consensual. So far, so good, but consent in a virtual world has some nuances that we might not expect, as we see in the next section. Okay, so that's the end of this article. So imagine it continues. Okay, I don't see a link to the next section, as mentioned, but yeah, there's no link to another section. Okay, so that's all that is free. I think you probably have to sign in to read more. Okay, so you got the idea of what I was trying to say. This technology that I'm talking about here in this building, where I'm being flagged and I'm being remotely monitored, and it seemed to be legal, but really it's not. An extension of that is to use the target for experiments. And the experiments are along the lines of what I just read. Directed energy weapons are being used to force the victim into submitting to being experimented with. And some of those experiments include being customized to managers, quote unquote, who are using you and your body to experiment with, to customize you sexually for their pleasure in a sadomasochistic way. So here are some names who are doing that. The worker, Gord, members of the board in this building, neighbors, other residents in the building, Selwyn, a tall black guy, Rick, ranty. Um, um, there were some other workers, some Mexican workers in the building. Um, the members of my family, people in the workplace, Stan, Craig, um, uh, uh, Indian men, Zapad, Gokaran, Jay, Jesse, uh, and tons of names in the companies. All these people took turns to hit me with directed energy weapons and experiment on me in the workplace, like is being done in this building. So the directed energy weapons is containment. The cops are running this experiment for containment. Red alert, yellow alert, orange alert. Turn up the power, the microwave power, according to the level of alerts. This is what 5G is going to be used for in the future as well. So my thighs are being hit right now. And that's it right there. So this is the experiment that the cops are running, but that containment is being used by traffickers such as PK and the people in the building, like the worker who's trafficking, because he has the contract with the cops and he's subcontracting to the contractors who's working with them, who are openly talking about what they do to me at night as I sleep. Because there are technologies around this unit and in the building and around other people's units, I'm sure, because the kids are being sold this way in the building. There was a female Chinese pimp outside my window selling a girl. So I know other people are being sold in the building as well. So there are antennas that are positioned around my bed. So above my bed, below the bed, beside, there are antennas that are focusing beams into my bed, into me in my bed. So when I sleep on the sofa, the power is turned up at around 11 for me to get up from the sofa to go into the bed. So because it's set up on the bed to be hit in a certain way. And as soon as I lie down on the bed, I get the hip between the legs. And the technology, there is haptic technology as well being used, but there is directed energy weapons that could be modified to penetrate the crevices in your body, eyes, ears, genitals. And the beam, it will be pulsed, just like in several videos that I posted previously. There's a pulsing effect in the beams, or else you'd be cooked. So there's a pulsing effect between your legs, and for men in your anuses, and they love the men. The people who are running this program are actually satanic. In the satanic world, sodomization is the preferred way it's the preferred sexual pleasure. Men are for pleasure, women are used to terrorize. So the men are actually the preferred sex for the preferred agenda, the preferred gender, I should say, for pleasure. So the men are also penetrated as well in this building. The men are penetrated in an in and out motion. Because as I said, a lot of these the perpetrators are satanic, bisexual gays. So they're after the men as well and the boys. And the women for pain, because the sadomasochistic tendencies in these criminals drive the pain factor in the torture program. So women, because they feel terror, they feel pain, they're more sensitive to these things. They express the pain and they express the terror and they feel it deeply. And the person who is torturing can view this, and the feedback is something that he gets off on. He gets sexual pleasure from torture. So women are the preferred gender to be tortured. The men are the preferred gender to be sexually pleasured, to get pleasure. So pain from women, pleasure from sex. So this agenda, this torture program is geared towards men and women, boys and girls. So it's not mostly women and mostly men. They're both being attacked with this virtual technology, this remote technology, because it makes it all the more possible. Now, men are seen as stronger, physically stronger, and are able to protect themselves from physical attacks, physical assaults more than women, which is why women are more physically attacked and physically raped. But here comes technology in the virtual world that makes it easy to assault a man, makes it just as easy to assault a man as it is to assault a woman. When the man is asleep, you rape the man. There is absolutely no difference between a man and a woman getting raped anymore. The men are going to be raped as equally as the women, because they're asleep while it's done. Your babies are going to be raped by pedophiles. So when I say get a microwave detector, this is where I'm coming from. There is no paranoia here. There are dirty cops and dirty military officials who's been using this technology for, I would say, at least 50 years and probably more than that. People like Rohini Besasa, when they say that they're chipped and they're being experimented with, their claims should be taken seriously, because we live in a world where these crimes are going to be mainstream. At this point in time, the crimes that Rohini Besasa is talking about that was perpetrated against her, that she's claiming has been perpetrated against her, are real, mainstream. Therefore, her claims should have been investigated. There should have been an investigation to her claims that she was being experimented with, rather than just saying that she was mentally ill. And as time goes on, and it's going to happen very quickly, more and more and more information is going to come forward in the mainstream, that will prove that Rohini Besasa's claim have enough there is enough credibility to have it investigated, rather than just push her aside and say, you're mentally ill. You're just mentally ill. Russell Williams and Epstein's case prove that there's a lot of rich, powerful men who take advantage of vulnerable people physically. Here we have virtual tools that are coming, that are mainstream, that allows that to happen easier, a lot easier, and cannot be tracked if you don't have the tools, or you don't even know that it's being done to you remotely. So Epstein and Russell Williams prove that it's being done physically. And now we have remote technologies that is being used to do exactly the same thing as Russell Williams is doing remotely. Why is there no investigation? Because there is going to be. Absolutely, there is going to be. As haptics come on board, and I'm going to give it a year, because COVID is going to go on forever, and people are going to want to have sex. So the haptic technologies are going to be used more and more. And then these crimes that I just read about in that article is going to be committed more and more. And there are going to be investigations on them. People are going to get chipped. They're going to be logged on to. without their consent. There are people who they're going to consent to, and then there are people who are going to hack into them and they're going to log into them. And with haptic technology, you rape them. And this technology is going to be out in the open, mainstream. So then, when that happens, and I'll give it a year or two, I'm gonna come back to what everything I'm saying here in these videos, in my tweets, and my date and the data that I'm documenting. And there is going to be an investigation. There has to be an investigation. Who are the men who's logging on to me right now in this building? Who are the people in this building who are taking contracts? Because I'm documenting it and I'm talking about it. It has to be investigated, and there is absolutely no diagnosis of mental illness. There is no diagnosis of mental illness. And I'm proving what I'm saying with data. There is no paranoia either. So there is going to be an investigation about what's going on. There's absolutely going to be a lawsuit for being illegally experimented on with by several groups of people, including the police, and by default, the government. There's going to be a lawsuit for that. And definitely by the people in this building. But the plan is to dispose of me before that happens, which is why I'm so viciously attacked in the heart area to cause, and I've documented that as well, to cause heart attacks. And I'm most likely had a few because they don't want retroactive investigations because this technology is out there already. So people like me who's been talking about this for 15 years at least are now credible, can now go to court with credible, mainstream, I should say, not, it's always been credible. Stand correct, I correct myself there. It's always been credible, but now it's mainstream, which gives it the perception of being even more credible. So now we can take it to the court. People like Helen Curdin, who's been talking about this for years as well, and all the other targets who's been talking about this for years and suffering and getting tortured. Now is the time to go to court. Talk to you another time.